Welcome. People throughout the city of Cambridge are...
Hello, we're back. This is Cambridge InsideOut. I'm Susanna Sagat.
And I'm Robert Winters.
And I'm Jesse Kansen-Benanav.
There you have it. Have a good night.
Yeah. Well, in our last exciting segment, we talked quite a bit about statewide and even a little bit of national politics because of the congressional race that's still sort of in the works. But I thought maybe what we could do is spend some time tonight and talk a little bit more back in Cambridge with the municipal elections and what's coming up. I think probably the first thing I want to mention here, actually even as we speak, like 57 seconds ago, up at the Cambridge Senior Center, so please turn off your TVs and rush to the Cambridge Senior Center.
No.
Oh, okay. But they're having...
They'll repeat it.
There's another City Council candidate forum hosted by the Cambridge Economic Opportunity Commission, CEOC, and the Alliance of Cambridge Tenants, which will most certainly talk a lot about housing issues, but not exclusively. Tomorrow night, there's the Cambridge Parent Advisory Council on Special Education. We'll have a school
Which is
committee.
October 23rd.
October 23rd. That's right, because who knows? You may be watching this in reruns.
So don't go.
WFUV-TV, Pittsburgh. Anyway, a candidate for school committee candidates at 6:30 up at the CRLS Media Cafe. Next Wednesday, apparently it's a twofer. I mean, I did my best to try and make sure there were no collisions, but one of the parties didn't contact me. So anyway,
Wednesday's the 30th, right?
on the 30th, Wednesday, October 30th, there's both a school committee candidates forum sponsored by the Friends of CRLS and the CRLS Alumni Association, 7 o'clock at the CRLS main cafeteria, and simultaneously at the Senior Center, it's Green Cambridge's Environmental and Energy Issues Candidates Night at the Senior Center starting at 7 o'clock. So, and I believe that will actually close out the candidate forum phase of things.
Phew.
We're happy about that.
Yeah.
That's enough. It's time to vote.
Right. No, it's actually been interesting. You know, one of the things I always say about candidate forums is it's not just for the public to find out about the candidate. It's actually a kind of a proving ground where candidates kind of sharpen their own skills. Most candidates don't go into this business knowing everything about they don't always have positions on things. And they develop them actually as part of this process. So it's a good part of the whole democracy thing.
Well, they learn what people want too. They hear from constituents.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I was at a Mid-Cambridge one back earlier in October, and I saw an interesting heated interchange between several of the candidates. And then at the Porter Square one, for which Susanna was the most magnificent timekeeper.
It's my calling.
It is, absolutely. You've got a real future in timekeeping, right? But those same candidates were then actually making, they now have better formed positions, and they were making, statements about this. And you could sort of see how it had developed just as part of an interaction earlier.
I would say also, just on that note, I think another thing that helps shape the candidates is candidate questionnaires. So separate from the forums themselves, I know many organizations have distributed them this year. My organization, A Better Cambridge, did one as well, and we actually had a response from one of the incumbent counselors who said, "Why don't you think about doing some sort of common questionnaire, like the college application?"
I believe I know who this candidate is.
Yeah, you probably do in the future. So
actually, I believe that candidate had actually approached the Election Commission and asked them to sort of be the clearinghouse for this. I said, "You've got to be joking.
Yeah.
There's no way."
Well, it's also how organizations want to be known to candidates, because they expect the candidates to find out more about them and learn about their issues.
And on our questionnaire, I was actually surprised there was a few candidates on a few questions who responded, "I just don't have enough information yet. I will have to get back to you."
Which
now,
is good.
They haven't necessarily gotten back to us, but it means that they hopefully took the time to look into those.
Yeah, I think some of the candidates were expressing a certain amount of candidate fatigue.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
They're like after the 15th questionnaire, and so and sometimes some of them are kind of nice, straight down the line, objective questions, expecting good answers. And sometimes it's almost like push polling, where they're sort of said, Well, wait, when did you stop beating your wife, Kennedy? So,
Right.
It's, they're not always so fair. I mean, I even remember that from back when I was so foolish as to be a candidate years ago, right? But anyway, it's a process,
Yeah.
and thankfully it's winding down. It's actually now, since this is Tuesday night, it's,
it's
2 weeks,
2 weeks.
14 days, a fortnight to the election, and I'm starting to get the sort of the blanket email messages
Yeah.
from candidates, and
I've gotten a few robocalls.
I've gotten some robocalls.
I've even gotten some spam text messages.
Oh, interesting.
Well, so one of them I got the other day was where they're saying push 1 if you're definitely going to vote for number 1. They're really trying to count number 1s carefully now.
Yeah.
It's getting to that stage, right?
Good,
So they can
they
then
should.
go, and especially if candidates who have a little money to spend, they want to then say, okay, if I know we got at least 800 of these, and I know I need 1,200 or whatever number 1s, then they're going to start spending their money much more wisely,
Targeted, yeah.
targeted in order to kind of get them out here. So one of the things I thought we might sort of do here, and it's sort of good to have Jesse in here because Jesse's sort of a regular man about town and involved in a few other things. And again, just speaking personally, when looking at the upcoming election, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, people were saying, well, who do you think's going to run, and what do you think the big issues are going to be, and how do you think this is going to play out? And it's kind of interesting to watch how things you thought were going to be big sort of turn out to be not so big, and things you never really counted on sort of emerge. That's one of the things you can actually pick up when you go to these candidate forums. One of the things, for example, people said when it was first known that Henrietta Davis was not running, in addition to Marjorie Decker not running, the big talk around town was, with the exit of 2 progressive women from the city council, what's going to happen, right? It's still, of course, that question will not be answered either here or any
at the
time over the
election
next
box.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it certainly spurred a lot of speculation on it. I'd have to say, it brought out, I think there are 2 prominent women candidates, right? New candidates?
New candidates, yeah.
I hope I'm getting that right.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Wish we had a list right in front.
But it's probably more,
I think I can give you
you could do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
But there are a lot of,
Excuse me, one
Jog the
second.
memory.
This is part of my technical skills.
but there are a lot of male candidates came out
Yeah.
as well, including some pretty significant, very credible candidates who've come out, right? So the notion that, at least 1 progressive woman will be elected, that's not a guarantee.
And of course, one of the progressive women who is retiring, Marjorie Decker, did throw her support behind Mark McGovern, who is
Right.
not a woman.
Exactly. So I sort of joke about that sometimes, say the towny part of Marjorie is those people are going to go for Mark, and then the sort of the progressive women, ones who want to vote somewhat based
Right,
on gender, are
should
going
I
to
show
vote
you
for the
the list?
others. Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I can. Hold on.
You can do that. You got the.
Oh, yeah, I can.
Look, we've got the specimen.
Yes.
All right.
Hello. Hold on. This is behind the scenes. Oops. I went the wrong way.
All right.
Zoom in.
Oh, I did it again. See, this is the part you're not supposed to see.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right. But what you're actually seeing here is a specimen, except for on election day, you won't see the big SPESIMEN scattered across the ballot. But this is pretty much exactly what the ballot is going to look like, except for the fact that you must remember that there are, for 25 candidates, there will actually be 25 different ballot styles, so that
And it
each
goes-
candidate will appear at the top of an approximately equal number of ballots. That's in the law. So the specimen is just straight alphabetical. So it just begins with the one at the beginning of the alphabet, who happens to be Dennis Benzan. But Dennis Benzan will actually be listed 25th on 1/25th of the ballots as well. But these are the candidates, and as you can see, I think the women candidates who emerged in the wake of the exit of Marjorie and Henrietta are Janneke House and Kristen von Hoffman.
And Leslie Phillips.
And Leslie Phillips, exactly. But now there's also, there are also incumbent women who will likely benefit from many of those ballots as well. So, notably, people like Denise Simmons and Minka von Busekum may very well pick up. Again, not in any way suggesting that everybody votes entirely based on gender, but in fact, they could very much pick up some of that support. If they're smart candidates, they'll certainly be targeting them as well, right? So.
but it is interesting to note the small list of female challengers, women challengers in this race, compared to the number of men who are challengers. And if my memory serves me correctly, there had been for quite some time talk of Mayor Davis not running for re-election, but she didn't make that decision public until relatively late. And so I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Maybe other potential women who thought they could share a base with her weren't ready to pull the trigger on a candidacy at that moment. I don't know, but
there's 5 women on the ballot, right? Is that what we just said?
I think that's right. Yeah.
3 challengers and then the
2 incumbents.
2 incumbents.
Right. But there's, again, not playing favorites here at all, but the thing is there are quite a few credible, one of the enjoyable things about going to candidate forums and actually listening to the candidates really speak is you come to realize that, sometimes Cambridge gets, we sort of laugh a little bit about the fringe candidates, it's Cambridge being Cambridge, right? But there are some pretty substantial people running here.
Oh yeah.
And that really, really comes through when you go to these candidate forums.
And one thing that's really excited me this year personally is the large number of young candidates running. Just looking at the list, and everyone has their different definition of young, but
You mean like Ellie Yarden?
Right.
That's a joke. Ellie's 90 years old and running.
So
God bless him.
But everyone from Janaki House, Logan Leslie, Nadeem Mazin, Jefferson Smith. I don't want to just name them all for the sake of naming them, but and of course Luis Vasquez, who I believe is the youngest person in the race, is maybe
25.
25.
I believe.
And it seems to me he's running a relatively strong candidacy as well. So just seeing the list of sort of, I don't know if it's the next generation of Cambridge politics or just sort of young people on their own deciding to get in. That's something that, as a young person myself, has excited me about this crop of candidates.
Well, as an old person myself, I've been actually speaking to as many of these candidates who are willing to listen to me, and I'm saying to them, you realize that 25 candidates is only going to be 9 winners, so therefore there are going to be 16 people who do not win. And it's extremely important that people stick around. There's some of the candidates in particular who I haven't really necessarily seen overly involved in local municipal affairs. Should they not win, they will have sort of, proven themselves, and now people will take them seriously. They will have been running together like the tennis tour, so to speak, with the other candidates who will now be the 9 city councilors. So they will have their ear, and they will be in a position where they can be influential, and they can also be community leaders. I've said this for years to new candidates, is that, considering the fact that the likelihood is as a new candidate you are not going to win, then what else do you intend to get out of this experience? And, you might think, oh, I'm kind of being mean to them or something, but I'm actually trying to say to them that you actually, win or lose, you can still win. You can still be an important...
It changes you.
It changes you, and, honestly, I haven't really felt that sort of civic involvement has been at a peak in Cambridge in recent years. It tends to be kind of dominated by the same olds. And I would love nothing more than to see some of these emerging candidates become actual leaders and, stay involved in civic affairs and not just sort of go away on November 6th. That would be certainly my ideal. So.
Jesse, why did you run for Democratic Party head?
Why did I run? Well, there was an opening to begin with. Our former chair, Jefferson Smith, decided to run for city council. I've been involved in Democratic Party politics really my whole life, going back to my own childhood and growing up in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. My father was actually in politics out there, and so it's sort of a bug that I've always had. And
Did you know my great-great-granduncle was in politics?
Oh, really?
He ran for president of the United States.
Who's that?
Alfred E. Smith.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, first
Do
Catholic.
you feel honored to be in my presence?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, you know, I'm not. No.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that is.
Right. It's in my blood. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
But I think in Cambridge, I mean, being a heavily Democratic city, I think there's a lot of opportunity through the Democratic City Committee to really sort of drive some progressive change, not only here in Cambridge, but really statewide. I do think that the large turnout that we had for Senator Warren last November really helped up her numbers statewide. And, you know, I was excited to be part of that. And so that's why one of the reasons I decided this past April to step up and run for chair of the city committee, Democratic City Committee.
Pretty good. Do we want to look at the school committee for age and gender or not? No? You
Yeah,
have something
no.
better?
Yeah. We could,
No, if you have something better.
well, we're just sort of continuing on a little bit of the thread I was going to
Yeah,
start a
go
little
ahead.
earlier. In addition to the two progressive women aspect of things, one of the things I predicted, perhaps incorrectly, was going to be a big defining issue was the threat of large development in Central Square.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, this is better.
Right. I know some are still talking it up a bit, but is it me or it just sort of seems to have fallen flat?
I think with that framing, it has not emerged as such an issue. I wonder if part of it is that the net zero, this Connolly petition,
It shunted it.
has sort of taken the place of that. Not that they're parallels for each other, but that I think a lot of the energy of people backing both was shared. There's a lot of people backing both.
I think that's accurate, and I think if you asked me a few months ago, that wasn't even on the table yet.
Right.
So that's
Right.
sort of become kind of the organizing center for some of the activist crowd who are also affiliating themselves with some of the candidates. I think that's fair to say. Another thing that I thought might be turned into an issue, and I guess to some degree it has been at some of the candidate forums, was the controversy, which wasn't really a controversy, in the hiring of the city manager last December. There were some people saying, "Oh, these are violations of the open meeting law," and you hear at the candidate forums a lot of talk about what's your stance about transparency in government, and a lot of times that's just sort of double talking about the fact that people didn't like the fact that they were expecting a big process for the hiring of the city manager, but it didn't really happen. It just sort of happened quickly.
On the other hand, there's more talk than I expected about figuring out the process for the next city manager, because that's not going to
That's right.
happen during this next term.
That's
It's
right.
going to happen in the term after.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are
Right.
questioning that
Yeah,
now.
it's one of those things, I mean, I'm glad to not be a candidate, but there were times when I'm listening to candidates talk, I want to jump there and go, I want to jump up and say, no, sir, that's not true. Let me tell you. Because anybody who actually attended some of the government operations committees leading up to that vote to hire Richie Rossi as the next city manager, you could see that coming a mile away. I mean, it wasn't even subtle. And what really turned it was the fact that the process that would have been involved in actually hiring consultants and delaying it would have gone on forever. So they said, look, let's just hire Richie now. It's really simple. And then we'll pick up the conversation down the road and very properly talk about what kind of process will be done in the future. So as far as I'm concerned, it was as transparent as can be. Anybody who was going to those meetings could see it happening. And so now we will have a more extensive process a few years from now. Maybe Rich could be rehired or maybe not. But the thing is, there will be, I'm sure, a much more significant process, with, another year and a half, 2 years. So let's see. One other new development, which I guess happened just about a week ago, maybe a little more, was 3 candidates joined together to form a slate of candidates. I think they're calling it the clean slate, which is sort of cute.
Yeah.
I guess.
And they're inviting others to join them, I think.
No,
Other
no,
new
no, no,
people,
no,
aren't they?
No.
No, it's just them?
I think it's just them. And
It's those 3, from what I understand. They said that they did approach others
Oh,
about
okay.
joining the slate, but no one chose to.
I mean, that's a decision you have to make. Is like, if you're on a slate, there is this even in the CCA days, that was the mother of all slates in Cambridge. the thing is, you could be on a slate of candidates and then essentially become, if you knew that you were going to elect 4 and there was a slate of 6, that meant 2 people were unofficially became the feeders.
Fodder.
And the fodder.
Fodder.
Your job was basically to get defeated and help elect the others. So one of the dangers about getting onto a slate of candidates is that if there is a dominant 1 or 2 candidates, you basically could end up getting kind of pigeonholed into being the feeder that essentially elects the others.
So how this happens is that people, you say, vote for the 3 of us, so vote 1, 2, and 3, and then when 1 loses, they go the vote, that ballot goes to 2 and then to 3. So they keep the ballots within themselves, right?
Yeah. Now the thing is, if you're running as a like when the CCA would run, which they did, actually the CCA didn't really come into existence until 1945, but there was a predecessor group that had been around going back into the 30s. So they were actually making endorsements of candidates going right from the very, very first PR election in 1941. Actually, just
Were you
because
part of that?
Yeah, that predates me.
See, I'm just trying to show Susanna here that in fact I'm a bigger tech nerd than she is, right? So
I give it to you. I give it to you.
So I went back today and I actually looked at the CCA slates going back to 1941. And it was interesting because, again, I won't believe, we would need another 3 hours to do this, but
Can't wait.
yeah. But, they would sometimes run slates. In the very first election, they had 11 candidates. Actually, in 1971, they had 12 candidates.
And it was still
on the
9
slate.
seats only all those times.
Well, the interesting
No, there
thing
might have
is
been
is
more
that,
than.
yeah, it was always it was prior, prior to 1941, there may have been more, but the
Right.
thing is, there were the 9 councilors from 1941 on.
Oh.
But the CCA were, in the first 2 elections, elected 4 candidates. So they could have had 25 people on the slate. They were still going to elect 4 candidates. And then for a few years, they elected 5. And then they elected 4 for probably about 20 years. And it kind of just went up and down. But in a way, it didn't matter how many candidates were on the slate. So that
There's only so many votes.
there were the CCA voters were going to elect the CCA candidates, and whether maybe you would be lucky enough to be the ones who won, but maybe you'd become a feeder. And I remember from being with CCA that they would actually say things like about some candidate, he's not going to run a strong campaign, is he? Because they didn't really want him to compete with the ones that they kind of really wanted to win. So that's how it sometimes worked. So it's a bit. Now, I should probably say here that the CCA is not the only organization that's ever run slates in Cambridge. There was, I think, and this is just sort of a sampler here. In 1973, in addition to the CCA slate, they actually had a slate of 6, and they elected 3, which was actually a drop because that very year there was a slate called the Grassroots Organization, the GRO. I love that. Grassroots. Get it?
So you got to think about this for the party for the future.
Acronyms?
Yeah.
No, getting these slates.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had
No, they-
7. They had 7 candidates on the GRO slate, and they elected 1, who was Sandra Graham, right? So she went in that way. In 1975, it was technically the CCA slate, I guess, really, but they called it the Cambridge Convention in both 1975 and 77, right? In those years, they were nominating 8, putting 8 people on a slate, still electing pretty much the same 4. Basically, it's been 4 and 5 the whole time through.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, I didn't actually realize this until I was looking at this today. They actually went down to a minimum. In 1997, the CCA endorsed 4 and elected 4. So they weren't putting no slack there. But the interesting thing is, depending on how you want to define the word progressive, and I don't know whether anybody ever gives a very good definition of that. The interesting thing is that when the CCA essentially went out of existence, it may exist still on paper, but they were, as far late as 2001, maybe 2003, I don't remember, they were having 6 on a slate, and they were down to electing about 3. As soon as the CCA slates kind of went away, and that whole notion about slate politics sort of became a thing of the past, they've actually elected 7 progressives pretty solidly ever since.
Yeah.
So,
What's that about?
well, one of the things that you'd see when you look at old ballot data is you could actually see that not only did the CCA slate define who CCA type voters should vote for, But it also, for a lot of these so-called independent voters, it identified who you shouldn't vote
Shouldn't-
for.
Oh, interesting.
So, you know, and if you talk to some of the old timers, they'll say, oh yeah, you knock on a door and they say, you're not with that CCA, are you? You know, and I ain't voting for any of them, you know, and, you know, so in a way, there was not only the CCA slate, but that created the anti-CCA slate effectively.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of interesting, when you took a lot of those mechanics away, I think you got probably a better reflection of the way Cambridge is today.
And I wonder, with the slate this year, I know we have 3 candidates on that slate. My sense of it was that probably isn't a sufficient number in order to, well, really maybe even get more than one of them elected, if any. And so I'm just wondering how that will turn out. And you know,
I
So
think
what is their position?
it's unclear. They are the clean slate, I believe, is what they're calling themselves. And
Which
the idea
means
is that
what?
they're a clean slate because, you know, all 3 of them are first-time challengers in this election, or for city council generally. And I don't know that there is a defining issue necessarily, or set of issues between them. I've done a little bit of research trying to figure that out, and just based on their individual responses to some of these questionnaires we talked about earlier, it doesn't seem like they're all in agreement on everything, which is not necessarily the way, you know, they don't need to be in agreement, but it was hard to define one particular issue that really did define them, other than just that they're new candidates.
I think in the end, maybe it really just comes down to the fact that you've got 3 challengers who are doing a little bit of pooling of resources, you know, with the hope that 1, maybe 2, maybe all 3 could end up being elected. They are still running their own separate campaigns. It's not like they've just sort of thrown themselves into a common pool. So. And with that, I think we actually are winding down for real.
We need
Isn't
to
that
thank
true?
our guests.
Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And
And I want to thank my co-host,
and same here. So until next time.
Cambridge Inside.